Hey everybody, this is Tim Hinton from Marching Roundtable and Marching Arts Education. Thank you so much for watching this. I'm really excited to have this conversation with these two really smart gentlemen from Pacific Crest. Glen Crosby, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for taking time to do this. Also, Stephen Estudillo. Stephen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. So thank you for being here. So Glen, you're the program coordinator and director of percussion, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And then Stephen, creative director and visual designer. Did I get that right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so I have to tell you, I was in San Antonio last weekend, and like your show was one of the highlights of the day for me. Like I was just completely knocked out, and I put a picture up on my Facebook page, and actually I kind of intended to put other shows, but like you were the one core that got a picture of my, not that that's that important, but a lot of people responded to it. But I was just super impressed, and I've liked what I've seen going on from Pacific Crest, but this year I felt like, wow, the show totally worked. The props that lit up and changed colors, like I was constantly surprised as the program was going on. And even after a while, I was like, oh, wow, they're changing colors for each movement. And then at the end, there were all these, I just kept being engaged and surprised by it. And that, to me, as a designer and a viewer, is the mark of a really great production. So first off, I just want to say congratulations. You guys are having a great season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. It's
Glen,
been a fun process, to say the least.
I'm sorry?
Say it again.
I just said, I'm sorry. How are things going for the core this season?
Better than ever, I would say. The process from top to bottom has been about as smooth as a process as I've ever been a part of. Being in the activity for the last, I don't know, good Lord, 30 something years, maybe even more than that, almost 40 years, I guess, since I started marching. And I've been around, I've been in the top three corps and seen a lot of shows be put together. But anything that I've been involved in, this is probably the smoothest it's gone, especially with the amount of turnover that we had in the staff from the beginning. When I talked to Stuart Pompel, the director, about actually coming on board, and Stephen was the one that actually asked me if I wanted to come on board a year ago. So I did a little bit of consulting and just kind of checked out the organization and was like, you know what, there's a lot of really good people here. I'm all in. And really from the first design meeting that we had in October with, there was myself, Stephen, Brad Green, who is the brass arranger, Easy Lancer, who does the battery stuff, John Zuniga, who does the sound design and pit. It was a really pretty organic process from the beginning to get going, and it was smooth. Everyone's been able to contribute, and Gabe Escobedo too, sorry, the guard instructor, the main designers that we had. It's just been a really smooth process.
Stephen, how long have you been a part of the organization?
Wow, that's a great question. I've been a part of the organization as a marching member in the early 2000s, and then I also came on staff, just on the visual staff in 2009. I became the visual designer in 2010 through 12. I took 2 years off, and then I came back as a visual designer in 2015 and have been here ever since. Took a little bit more responsibility for what the show is as a creative director in 2016 and on. So a total of maybe 10, 11 years or something like that, with the core in some capacity, whether it be a performer, a designer, an instructor, or, serving food, I don't know, just all kinds of different little tasks.
People don't know how many roles, how many hats people wear.
Yeah. No, I mean, we have an all-in kind of mentality, and so when you're there, you help in whatever capacity is asked,
Well, I'm super impressed with everything that's going on. So I want to share with you, before I let you guys really talk about sort of how the show came to be put together, I want to share with you my experience of watching the show. So out it comes, big triangles, it's super clean, and I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. Like, what in the world's going to happen to this? But I had no idea. So the first time one of those props lit up, I was knocked out, and it was a huge surprise. So how you were able to design it so that I didn't know that was there is, to me, part of the genius of it, because I was surprised. And then, oh, it wasn't just the one. Oh, wow, they're all lighting. Like you had me rolling. But I want to tell you, there was a moment, and you'll know where this moment is. I don't even remember where it was. There was a moment where the core is sort of right near where the drum line is, and the cymbals do some sort of visual to pull their cymbals up, and the whole core did the same visual with the cymbals. And I was like, holy crap, this show is firing on every cylinder. Like, to me, for some reason, that moment like took the core to another level. And I said, okay, wow, this is like super thought out, detailed, smartly put together. Like, that was a moment for me. And I don't even know if that's an important moment in the show. I'm just telling you, that was like ingrained in my head. And that was the moment where I was like, I turned to Jason, my friend, and I was like, oh, wow, this is like really good. He's like, yeah, this is like really good. And so from that point on, we were like, wow, like this is, and then it just kept firing, you know? So I just want to share that moment with you because I was really impressed. There seemed to be like a level of thought and detail to it that was like, you know, on a high level.
Yeah, no, we appreciate that. You know, the beginning of this show, starting to create this show really came down to a couple things. You know, we had a couple goals in mind, beyond any competitive element. Was we want to make this show memorable. We want to make sure that when we take the floor, when we take the field, we want to come across as a new version of ourselves. You know, I always joke that when we took the field, I wanted people to go like, who's this again? Like, what are they about to do? Even with the setup, and you know, so we tried playing with a few different things to speak to the props and the clean lines that it creates. You know, we really wanted to look polished and classy from the first moment that you saw us, and part of that was, you know, a lot of planning in the construction of these props and making sure that they are you know, high quality props that are going to last us all year and that they're going to serve the function that we need them to. So we had a good team of people kind of involved in creating those props. We had an engineer here from Orange who helped us make those, just the frames, and then we had two specialists from Mississippi who came out and helped. One put them together, and then the other program all of the things that are going on with it. So there was a big number of people involved in that, and so we're really thankful for those people. But beyond that, you know, the show was really intended to go against the grain for what we normally do. And so I feel like we were able to accomplish that in many ways, not just the maturity of the composition, but also asking the performers to be a little more mature than where we felt the core had been in the past couple of years. So, you know, it was a full-fledged effort from the entire organization to really step up our game, as they say, and try to put something together that was going to be memorable and hopefully have that type of response from people.
Yeah, well, I would say, like, let's talk about how clean it looks, because like that is like the holy grail for us when we're designing and you're trying to make these props. Like, it's super. There's a triangle in the field, am I right?
Yeah.
And then there's the triangle prop, and like it's so clean. So is that just good design? It's very simple, but like the field looks like somebody went and like mopped it before you guys went out there. You know what I mean? Like there's just something so super clean about it. Do you have an idea of how that happened?
Yeah, so the very first thing we tried to do was subtract all the color and allow the palette to just be what it is. So we went monochromatic. There's no color when you first enter the field. You know, from the uniforms that have the isolated, really simple, minimalist design on the chest. There's a little bit of a sparkle to one sleeve and then nothing on the other sleeve. Those were all conscious decisions. You know, we had many different iterations that had splashes of color, but even then it started to look a little like it lost a little bit of its identity. So when we were able to strip that uniform down to just a sleek black and white kind of monochromatic scheme, that kind of lent itself to the props. Now the props, the size of them is great for this football field. We knew that we wanted several different props. We knew we wanted more than 8, maybe not more than 10, you know, maybe more 12. We weren't sure. And then when we finally saw the scale of this one, we were like, yes, that'll look great. And so the clean white against the stark grass, the dark green grass, whether it be turf or natural grass, was something that we wanted to exploit a little bit. And so with those two things, we kind of use the first form, the opening set with the props to create a bit of a cage or a bit of a zone where everything was confined, and making sure that we just kind of cleaned up all loose ends. The other thing that was very helpful is throughout the show, we have obviously different flag silks and different colors that we reveal. However, we wanted to make sure that we eliminated that the opportunity for that to be seen early on. So most of these props carry a large portion of the flag silks, and so you'll rarely see any flag silks, any color across the front. And so we have a clean front sideline, and most things happen across the back or at the props. And so really, and then really it comes down to basing the entire show off this simple geometric shape, which is three-sided. It's kind of like how can you paint the picture with the fewest amount of brushstrokes is what I like to say, and I feel like that was the model that we used.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and it's like you took one very simple idea and then like did all these things with it, and that's the hallmark of a great show, really. So yeah, I love that, and you're right. I hadn't even thought about it, but all those colors came as a surprise. There was no way, and I love that when you can't telegraph everything that's about to happen. So that's very cool. Glenn, I promise we're going to let you talk, but I want to ask him another question about the props. Do you mind?
Go ahead, man. I'm cool.
Okay, so can we talk about how they light up and how that's controlled? Because it's very intricate. Like, is there somebody stopping and starting those effects? I'm assuming. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah. So there's quite a bit of things going on. Each prop has obviously LED strips. And then each one of those goes into a receiver, and each receiver is controlled by someone from the front ensemble who has a laptop and some software. It's like DJing software or something like that. They can control each independent prop one at a time. But really, we've programmed that software to mimic essentially the coloration of our show. And so that we have a performer who sits there and follows along and triggers every single effect. Sometimes the intricate effects, sometimes the effects get as intricate as, there's a point in the show where it's a chromatic scale and the girl has to, play every single note so that it follows along the effect, the desired effect. Other times it's as simple as one button and then they all come on. And so Toni Lineman is someone from Mississippi who I've been working with for a long time, who is the expert. He's the guru and all that. And so he was able to come out and help us and just be a part of the team when we were kind of putting this all together. And so he was able to help us through that program, help set up some events and things like that. So very appreciative of his help and very thankful for him in that process. But it has added an extra layer of coordination that I'd never considered in show design, where the light is going to draw the focus. And so a lot of times, we're talking about music, we're talking about visual, we're talking about where the color guard is, percussion, staging of all the elements. And now we're worried about if the light is on in the right place, because it's very, very easy for a light to flicker on over here while you have the focus over here, and then we get some extra issues. So we've had to come through that several times just to make sure that it doesn't just become the light show, that it's not just flickering the whole time. So we had to be tasteful with our use of those lights. But yeah, there was a lot of learning. There's a big learning curve in the implementation and addition of those lights in the show. So.
Well, and actually the fact that Toni Lineman was involved, I should have guessed that actually, because I actually did a podcast with him a few years ago when he at Pedal. He had first bought these giant LED screens, and he talks about buying them from China and trying to put them together. I don't know if he told you that story. But,
yeah, I was working with him on those.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, were you part of that? Okay. Well, I was knocked out, and I came home from WGI or from watching it or whatever, and had a conversation with him about that. And that's a really interesting. That podcast is still there, by the way, if anybody wants to see that. It's really interesting. But yeah, and I love that you talked about how you used some restraint and it was very tastefully used. That's what I thought was interesting about it. It was another element, like a flag or a impact or whatever. It's just one more thing. But I think that anybody that's watching this, watch this show, because it's a really great example of how to use an effect like lighting as just another way to create effect in the show without it being a gimmick or taking over or distracting. Like, in fact, I felt like it was another way to engage me with the music, with the colors and when the things lit up. I don't know. It was all very tastefully done, and I appreciate that you were so thoughtful and used some restraint there, because a lot of times we see lighting effects and it's very distracting, actually.
Right.
And that bothers me all the time. So I love the fact that this seemed like just the right amount.
Yeah, that was a conscious effort to make sure that happened.
Sure.
It's very easy to say, like, let's light them up, So we had to be judicious with when we wanted them on and not.
Yeah, well, I just think it's a great example for anybody that's trying to figure out how to do this right. I think you guys really did do that right. So Glenn, I don't want to leave you out of the conversation. You sort of wrangled all this and helped put this all together, and you do percussion. How did that all happen? How'd you end up in both those roles?
Oh boy. I think I alluded to it earlier when I first talked to Stuart about Stephen brought me on to do some consulting last year. Once I decided to go all in, I could see that we needed to make some changes if we're going to actually succeed and get where we needed to get to. So we did, we got an entirely new battery staff. Most of these guys that are on the battery staff are people who I've taught with at Pulse Percussion or POW. So they already understood the kind of system that we would want to use for the percussion section. So that was really seamless to get those guys started on that. Then with the design changes, we kind of lucked out getting Brad Green for the brass arranger. Donnie Van Doren, who I'm sure you know is the godfather of everything brass, suggested Brad and said, I highly recommend him. And as soon as I heard that, I told Stuart, get him immediately. And from that point on, getting Gabe Escobedo to come over after he was with Academy the last few years. And I worked with him, I believe the last couple of years I was with Academy in like 10 or 11. And then once we got going, it was really, it's really interesting. Like just listening to you guys talk about the props and being judicious. For me, everything comes down to balance. And I think we've done that masterfully this year, balancing all elements where nothing gets too, again, it's not a gimmick. It's really, really intertwined into everything that we're doing. It's the same thing with the sound design. John Zuniga is a master sound designer. And you don't really hear, there's electronics being used. We have 2 synth players, but they're used in a way that completely weaves its way into the music pretty much all the time. You don't all of a sudden get like a blast of synthesizer or, just electronics for the sake of doing it. There's times, there's a time earlier in the season, the first part of our closer, and there's a synth sound that's playing along with, we have this rock out section in the closer. And I sat listening to it one night and I'm going, wow, we actually almost sound like a legit music ensemble. I don't mean that to be like disrespectful to drum corps or anything, but this is one of those things where when you sit and listen, does this sound like I'm at a gig in a club, listening to a fusion band or something? And it came across that way and I'm going, wow, we're really kind of onto something here in terms of balancing out all the elements and the way we present it musically and visually. And even going back to the beginning of the design process, I remember one of the things that we had talked about is that we have to change the perception of the core. And the first thing that came to mind before we even really had a concept, the first thing I said I would like to do is we got to come out as aggressive as possible. So that's where the idea behind that first movement came. I wanted us to come out and basically punch the stands first thing to say, all right, this is something different and get people's attention. And I think that's worked pretty well too.
Yeah, well, no question. You had my attention actually when you came out with the props, and then that happened, and I was, like, well, I've already said, like the whole thing played out. I also want to point out that we had talked before we started this recording about all the growth of the core. I want to talk about that too, because not everybody has like super experienced members, and sometimes people don't remember that we have a lot of young kids in a lot of these cores that have a lot of good training, and they grow so much. And so you want to talk about the growth of the core this season, because there's a real command of the show, and I'm betting you have some young kids.
Oh yeah, there's plenty. But honestly, the talent level of students now, being involved in the activity for so long, even as young as these kids are, if I go back to when I was teaching Garfield cadets in '85, there's more talent here than there was in a corps that won a championship. That's how much the activity has evolved. But again, I think really we got all the staff members in place who we knew could teach. And there's never, I think all of us made a point that, to the rest of the staff, it's like, it doesn't matter who's in front of you, you teach them, and you go from beginning to end, and then you take a look back and see how far you got. No complaining about talent. It's like you chose the kids that you have, teach them. It's pretty simple. And everyone's done that. It has been an all-in mentality. I mean, I know that we've talked about with everyone, it's like, I don't ever want to hear someone say, that's not my job. It's like every job is for everybody. It doesn't matter what it is. If we're going to succeed, one of the things I said at the beginning of the season with Stuart is like, it's going to take an extraordinary effort from every single person in the organization for us to move forward at all, just to get started, to be recognized and change the perception of the organization. It's going to take a monumental effort from everybody. And up to this point, we've had that. And we really just got to finish the last 2 weeks now to finish out the season in almost perfect fashion, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, mission accomplished. Did you just throw out a little Garfield 85 reference in the middle of all that?
Yeah, I thought that was my first year teaching. I aged out of Blue
Awesome,
Devils
man.
and went straight to Garfield Cadets. Me and Tom Ungst were two little punks teaching.
That's that's fantastic, man. I mean, I've been around so long. I love that show, and I remember seeing that. So anyway, that's very cool. That's
how
awesome.
early in the season did you see it? Do you remember? Because I remember the first show, I think, was in Bayonne, New Jersey, and the whole staff, the fact that we got through Bernstein's First Symphony without it completely melting down, the whole staff gave a standing O, and everyone in the audience just sat there going, what the hell did we just look at?
Yeah, that was definitely stretching the activity, but in a way that I really appreciated. So that's fantastic that you were a part of that, and with Tom and everything. That's very cool. So Stephen, I want to ask you something. Like I said at the beginning, what I loved about the show was that there's all this interesting setup, and then you did things I didn't expect. And one of the other things that you started doing was they kept like jumping through the triangles, can you talk about how, I don't know, like the idea of doing that? And I think it's so effective. I don't know what the concept is behind it, except that I just really liked it.
Yeah, no, there's obviously some athleticism, and there's some energy created just by doing that. And, it's very athletic and those kinds of things. But really, the show speaks to a multitude of things. The show is in essence, it's an abstract presentation of things, experiences, conversations, people that we've come across in our lives that have left a positive or negative impact, a footprint in who we are. The idea is that those things will always be inside of us. There are things that we are because of. And so, the triangle motif is not just it's not just a triangle. It's not just something that lights up. It does represent, let's say, a portal of some sort looking through into a previous experience in some way. And so there's the moment where we're circling through the props, and we're diving through, and we're running out. And that to us is like a moment where you're scanning through your memories, or scanning through your experiences, a flush of memories to your head, and you're just kind of going through all of them, and the lights are flickering, and it's supposed to be a little bit more representative of those moods or emotions that you felt at those times. And so, throughout the whole show, we reference this prop as like I said, a portal to between where you are and where you were. Kind of like the idea of, there's been several movies or things like that where there's like an older man staring into a mirror, and they see a younger version of who they are, telling them what to be and what they should be, what they should do now. So in a lot of ways, we kind of, in a way, we reference that. And we utilize these props to be more than just, we're trying to make sure that there's a use for all kinds of different sheets. So like on a visual proficiency sheet, there's this pretty athletic motion moving through. On the general effects sheet, it has a conceptual purpose and the manipulation of those things, and presenting a variety of different effects, not just lighting up, but being involved with them, manipulating them, being manipulated by them. And so when we utilize these props, and we're really focusing on making sure that we have a range of things we can do with them, not just lights, but also something we can also delineating parts of the field, also lighting up. And so that's more specifically what we wanted those props to be throughout the show.
Well, and thank you for saying that, because that makes my point again, is that this is how you're supposed to do props, people. Okay, like this, if you're watching this, study this, because all those things he just said about how all the different ways and that it impacts the show and the proficiency of the performers and shows off the proficiency of the performers. I actually almost said the word portal as I was asking you about it, but I was like afraid to use that word. But that's actually the impression I had.
Yeah, that's great. And we're not trying to go out and say anything overtly, because we do want people to observe, and just like the show speaks to a multitude of different things that I've experienced that who make me who I am. To you, you're going to have a whole bunch of different experiences, but where we can find common ground is that you have seen these moods. So like, you have been happy. Something that made you happy was probably very different than made me happy. Something that's made you frustrated or has been a trial in your life has maybe been very different for me. Same with loss. These are all emotions and experiences that we can all relate to in our different ways. And we're just trying to present little like snapshots of people's experiences that have shaped them, molded them into who they are now. And that's where we see the spectrum of colors at the very end. And that represents, these are the multitude of different milestones or landmarks in your life that have kind of been able to compose who you are. And it all starts with this singular triangle that is used to kind of initiate the show. And so the members lay on their backs to start the show, and that first one comes on, and that's the equivalent of you laying on your bed and just having a flashback or a memory that pops in your head and jars you awake. And so that's where the whole show starts.
And I love it. To me, it's like it's an idea that is so clear and simple. I'm not saying the show is simple. The show is very complicated, but the point is the idea and the way it's being presented is so clear and simple, and that's the holy grail of show concepts. So I really think you guys, you did that, and I got a lot of what you're saying. I don't think necessarily all consciously, but it all makes sense as you're saying it. I'm not thinking, well, I don't know, I get it.
Sure. Yeah, the challenge is obviously always to be as clear with your intent as possible, but also not painting yourself into a corner. We joked a lot about like, oh, this is the idea of like the memory of your first kiss. It's like, no, we don't want to go there. That's too specific. But there are moments in the show where we display and we explore the concept of losing something. Losing someone, whether it's a death, whether it's a previous relationship, whether it's a family member, whether it's something that you really, really prized at some point. Just the idea, the emotion that you feel when you have lost something is very powerful. It can bring you down to your knees and just wipe you down. And so being specific with the emotion allows us to really connect with the members and allow the members to invest who they are into the show. So now when we're talking about emotional qualities and really getting them to perform at a higher level, we're asking them to dive into who they are as people and bring that to the performance, as opposed to saying, hey, you're late on count one and you need to roll on three. It's like, no, I need you to reach for that thing that triggered you, and I need you to roll away from it so that you can have a deeper connection with the actual movement that we're asking you to do, as opposed to just filling in counts with your body. And so that has been a huge teaching point for us.
Well, and the way I've talked to a lot of people about trying to teach performance in this age of not having a hat and our faces are so visible, and the students are being asked to perform and express all of that. What you just described is, that's what people always say, is like, let them bring something personal to the table so that what they are showing me seems more authentic, as opposed to smile here, frown here. I had a wonderful conversation with Sammy Mooney about this very thing. And anybody watching, if you haven't seen that, watch that too, because she talks about the same thing. It's like there's a way that it looks authentic, and there's a way that it looks like you just told them how to move, and that's hard. So I love that you're talking about that, letting them bring their own personal experience to the table to help them make that authentic emotional presence.
Right. Yep, that's the goal.
Even talking about pure performance too. I was thinking the last few days, now that I'm going back in, a way for the kids, the members, to really tap into all their emotions. Really, their whole experience this year is something that's fresh, and there's probably been all of the uh, uh, emotions that we're trying to portray in the show has probably happened to them over the last 6 months. So there's
Yeah.
definitely something that they can all tap into, whether it be the frustration of trying to, figure something out, or, loss, any kind of darkness that's happened in the process, and the obvious joy at the fact that we're finally doing well and everything seems to be moving forward. So that's definitely something I'll be tapping into. I've read a friend of mine gave me a book called An Actor Prepares by a Russian director, Antonin Stanislavski, about 20 years ago. And actually, it was funny. He told me, he said, read this. This is what you do. And I was like, oh, okay. And I read through it, and I'll be using some of that material about just performance, understanding how to make it authentic. Because it's a difficult, I think the last thing and the most difficult thing to teach at any level is to make something feel real. Because it's not about a facial expression, it's about what your body, what internally, what your soul feels while you're playing or while you're moving. And that's a really difficult thing, and you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to allow those emotions to show. But when you get it and you get a collective energy out of an entire group of people, like especially 150 people, it's a really, really powerful thing. I learned that really with Santa Clara, probably when we were doing the Phantom of the Opera shows in '88 and '89, because that thing was just full of all kinds of emotion. It was one of the first times I really kind of had to dive into that and work on getting performers to emote for real, not just trying to make a face. Like sometimes people like to make the grr face. Drummers like doing that all the time, but that does nothing for me unless there's something behind it that actually really makes you react. So I would rather see people who have the ability to stand completely still and do nothing and still connect with another human being without ever saying a word. Then you're actually really doing something.
Wow, which is why the drum corps is so thrilling, because when you get a collection of all these really talented, well-trained performers, and they are all bringing that level of emotion and performance and authenticity, like that's why it's so thrilling. And I love that the marchers at Pacific Crest are getting that and getting that training and getting that conversation. Did you say the book was An Actor Prepares?
Prepares, yeah. I think it's like the first, it's kind of, from what I hear, it's the kind of the first volume or the Bible of acting. There's other ones that supplement that. But the guy, the director actually writes, it's a really good read. He presents himself as a young actor going to study with a famous Russian director. And it's his process of going through from beginning to end to the point where he can actually just create a character, on call. It's there all the time. But there's a definite process that you go through to be able to understand that and get yourself to be able to do that.
Very interesting. So
I highly recommend it.
You mentioned that the students know that they're having a good season. I want to make sure, like, do they know that people are loving the show and reacting to them in sort of this bigger way? Are they? I just wondered. I mean, maybe they don't even worry about it. They're just doing their job. But I just wondered. I guess me as a fan now, sitting in the stands from the show, I just want to make sure they know, like, people are talking about them, and it's exciting.
Yeah, I think they know. I think part of one of the things that was calculated from us as a design team was to be low key and kind of fly under the radar. I think the term I was using a few months ago was under hype and over deliver. That's why we didn't put out a big show announcement. A lot of it, when the admins were saying we got to get the show announcement, going, relax. We'll get to it when we get to it. We want the show announcement to be the first time we step off and blast the stands. And people go, like Stephen was saying, I mean, a lot of what we talked about is, in a lot, I wanted people to be able to walk up to the percussion section and go, who's this? This is really good. Who is this? I wanted people to be completely confused by seeing us. And then it's like, oh, okay, there's something different going on there. So it was a conscious effort to under hype and then actually over deliver, which I think we've done.
Yeah, and I think that has bled into the members of the core. I think they, more than knowing that they are, there's a buzz. I think specifically they're just really enjoying what they're doing. And when we get to that point in the season and they're working all day, every single day, I think that outweighs falling into the idea of like, hey, we're doing way better than we are, or kind of following along. I think they know in essence because they're starting just to do the right things at all times, and I think that's a byproduct of that. In the past, maybe it wasn't that way, but we have certainly tried to, like we've made a concerted effort to try to change the culture of the members as well, and saying like, here's your gig, this is how you have to approach it. Whether people like it or hate it, you still do your gig the way it's supposed to be done. And I think that is having some positive results because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Makes perfect sense. And I love the fact that you said that what the bottom line is, they're just really enjoying what they're doing. And like, that is goal one of everybody in the marching world of any kind. Like, you want the kids to have a great experience and have a good time doing it. And then all the rest of it, much less important in my opinion. So that's awesome. And you've given the students a fantastic vehicle. You're giving them good training. So lucky members of Pacific Crest. That's awesome. I love that you guys are doing that for them. Anything else that we haven't talked about the show that you guys want to mention before we finish this conversation? Anything? We've kind of covered it. I just didn't know if there was anything else.
I think just check out the diversity in the music. One of the things that, we've been told you're engaging the entire time. We're memorable. I know you just had a conversation with Dean Westman, who's a close friend. And I used to go down to Texas and work with his school. And one of the things he would always say to his band before they would go to a gig is, do you want to win or do you want to be remembered? And that's such a great way to approach it. And definitely seem like we're on the path to being memorable this year, which is the best thing that we could possibly ask for in terms of an outcome. The competitive stuff, I always say, you know what, if you're doing the right things, the competitive stuff will take care of itself. I don't focus on it. I don't look at numbers very often at all. I just want us to actually, get to the point where we reach our full potential, whatever that is. As long as everyone does that, we've succeeded, and I mean that sincerely too. I know there's lots of people kind of talk about that too, but we're serious about that, where, everyone wants to do well competitively. And I don't do this to be 30th place, but at the same time, it is more about the experience, and to be able to transform a group in 1 year like we have is probably one of the best experiences I've had in the 30 plus years I've been doing this.
Well, that's fantastic. Stephen, final thoughts from you about all this?
I think at the end of the day, when we look back and reflect on the show itself speaks to the experience that we're having right now. The title Everglow represents things that have left an imprint in who we are that we will carry forward into the rest of our lives. And I think this experience at Pacific Crest this year has done that. From the members to the design team to the staff to the administrative team, it's been a very refreshing experience for me, having been around Pacific Crest since 2009 on the educational side. Just seeing everyone and the community around Pacific Crest kind of latch onto this. Even alumni, starting to be even more active than they already were. We have a pretty diverse and active alumni as it is, and just hearing their constant support has been very, very refreshing. And so to me, this show speaks to the experience that we're having now. You don't know that it's leaving an imprint until it's done. And so fortunately we have, I think 17 days left to enjoy it. And then we'll see the kind of impact it leaves moving forward.
Well, it definitely left an imprint on me, and I loved it. And I'm so impressed with you guys. Please share my thoughts with the whole staff and the members or whoever. Like, I'm impressed with everything that's going on. I think it's super exciting, and a lot of smart decisions were made, a lot of good teachings going on. So thank you guys for talking to me. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Find other interviews and videos from top DCI designers, instructors, and marchers, behind-the-scenes videos, interviews, and podcasts from winter camps, spring training, traveling during the season, and performances, all at marchingartseducation.com/DCI-2019. The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.